He was pulled over in broad daylight, without speeding, without swerving. The officer asked for his license, then ordered him out of the car. Others drove by unnoticed. But what the officer didn't know, sitting quietly in the backseat, was the deputy director of the FBI. So what happens when power meets someone who's no longer silent? Before we dive into this powerful true story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us tell stories that reveal truth, challenge injustice, and inspire change. Thank you. It was an ordinary Saturday morning in Newford. The kind with soft sunlight on the sidewalk and coffee still steaming in Malik Thompson's travel mug. His car was clean, as always, a 2011 Camry, modest but dependable, with a small photo of his daughter taped near the dash. He had started early, trying to squeeze in extra rides before noon, hoping to finish saving for the laptop Layla needed for college. When the next ride pinged, he accepted it like any other. Pickup. Downtown. Passenger. Naomi E. He didn't ask questions, just drove. That was the job. At the curb, he stepped out, opened the rear door, and greeted the woman in the navy suit with a polite nod. She said nothing, just got in, and for the first few blocks, everything felt normal, until a patrol car appeared in his mirror, and someone crossed the line. The morning hadn't quite arrived yet, but Malik Thompson was already on the road. The streets of South Newford still wore their coat of mist, and the only sounds were the steady hum of streetlights and the occasional shuffle of early risers. Malik stepped out of his apartment building quietly, not wanting to wake his neighbors. He closed the door gently, tugged the collar of his neatly pressed, worn blue shirt, and adjusted his cap. His car, a silver 2011 Camry, waited just across the sidewalk, always parked in the same spot under the faded streetlight. The Uber placard behind the windshield had curled slightly at the corner, and Malik smoothed it out without thinking. He moved like someone used to routines. Careful, measured, calm. He opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and tapped the ignition. The engine groaned softly to life. Before pulling off, he took a second to glance at the small photo of his daughter Layla taped to the dashboard. She was smiling in a blue hoodie, standing under a banner that read, College Fair 2023. Her birthday was in 10 days, and Malik had promised her a laptop. Not the top-tier ones her friends had, but something decent enough to get her through freshman year. That promise was why he had accepted the extra shift this Saturday morning, even if he had only managed 4 hours of sleep after working late the night before. His first few pickups went by uneventfully, nurses getting off the graveyard shift, a groggy couple headed to the airport, a college kid too quiet to talk. The city was still yawning, still stretching its limbs. At the intersection near Hamilton and 12th, a black SUV swerved in without signaling, cutting in front of him with inches to spare. Malik braked smoothly, without laying on the horn. Inside the SUV, a man in a crisp white shirt gave Malik a look, one of those slow side-eye assessments that had no words but plenty of meaning. Then the SUV sped off. Malik exhaled. It wasn't worth responding. He had learned a long time ago that there were two kinds of people in traffic: the ones who thought they owned the road, and the ones who just wanted to get home in one piece. A soft chime on his phone broke the silence. A new ride request. Naomi E., he murmured, confirming the name, then pressed accept. The pickup location was near the Federal District, an area of the city that always felt quieter than it should, as if people were careful not to speak too loud around authority. When he arrived, he parked at the designated spot and stepped out of the car. Morning light had begun to climb over the tops of the courthouse buildings. He rounded the car, opened the back passenger door, and nodded politely. The woman stepped in without a word. She wore a dark navy pantsuit, not flashy but cut with precision. Her posture was straight, and her face unreadable. She didn't look at him, just gave a small, perfunctory nod before adjusting her seatbelt. "Good morning," Malik offered gently, but there was no reply. He wasn't offended. He returned to the driver's seat, typed in the destination, Newford Federal Building, and pulled off from the curb. The car moved smoothly, but a small vibration on the dash caught his attention. The old analog clock he had stuck to the center console wobbled slightly with every bump. Then, as he turned left onto Jefferson Avenue, The small pen he always kept tucked in the space between the gearshift and cup holder fell to the floor. He reached down at the red light to pick it up, brushing his fingers over the scratched plastic barrel. That pen had been with him for years. From job interviews that didn't go anywhere to forms signed for Layla's school. He placed it back into its spot like someone placing a piece of themselves into the right pocket. The woman in the back hadn't spoken a word. Her silence wasn't rude, more like practiced. Malik checked the rearview mirror briefly. Just a flicker. She was looking out the window. Jaw tight. He had no way of knowing who she was. Not yet. Not this early in the ride. Not until the street ahead pulled them both into something neither of them expected. And certainly not until that single, routine pickup would become the one story he'd never forget. The city had begun to stir. Sunlight filtered through the government buildings like it was trying to break through quietly. Not to wake anyone too fast. Malik's car hummed steadily down Newford Avenue, past rows of brick facades, bronze statues, and empty bus stops still wet from the morning sprinklers. The streets looked polished, as if the city had scrubbed itself clean for a new day. Inside the car, though, the weight of the week lingered. Naomi sat motionless in the backseat. Her shoulders were still, her gaze fixed somewhere past the tinted glass. She hadn't spoken a word since stepping into the car. Malik had offered his usual greeting, nothing fancy. Just enough to let her know he saw her, but she didn't respond. And that was fine. He wasn't one to fill the silence for the sake of it. Still, something about the quiet felt louder than usual. Malik adjusted his grip on the wheel. His hands were steady, but his mind wandered. Every corner of the route felt familiar. He had driven this stretch of road more times than he could count. But that morning, each turn carried a little more weight. His thoughts drifted back to Layla. 18 now, just old enough to start needing things he couldn't always provide. She'd been accepted to state last month, first in his family to go to college, but with tuition, books, and housing. The laptop had dropped to the bottom of the list. He'd tried. He'd gone to the bank. Sat across from a young woman in a gray cardigan who hadn't looked him in the eye once. She had scrolled through his paperwork, pursed her lips, and then, with a rehearsed kind of coldness, said, "Your credit history doesn't qualify." "I'm sorry." He wasn't surprised. That didn't make it sting any less. He remembered thanking her politely, then stepping out into the parking lot with his shoulders slightly lower than when he'd walked in. That feeling had followed him around since, a dull weight behind his ribs. This ride, this quiet Saturday shift, was just another effort to lift it, even if only a little. Back in the car, Naomi shifted slightly. Her jacket made a soft rustle, but she still didn't speak. Malik glanced in the rearview mirror, catching her eyes for just a split second. She was watching him, maybe only because she sensed his glance. He nodded out of habit, a small gesture of respect. She didn't nod back, but she didn't look away either. He didn't know what that moment meant. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. The city rolled by them in clean, straight lines. Government buildings, post offices, white stone steps leading to heavy glass doors. Naomi still hadn't given any instructions, but Malik already knew where she was headed. People dressed like her, quietly expensive suits, polished shoes, and the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself, usually had business in the federal district. Malik adjusted the air vents, more out of habit than need. The temperature was fine, but the silence had started to fill the car like a fog. Still, he didn't reach for music, didn't ask if she wanted a different route. He had learned, long ago, that some silences weren't meant to be broken. Some people carried their noise on the inside. A streetlight turned yellow, then red. Malik brought the car to a gentle stop. Outside, two joggers passed, their breath visible in the cool air. An older man in a service uniform swept the sidewalk, pausing now and then to stretch his back. Life moved in ordinary rhythms, and yet Malik felt the day building toward something he couldn't name. He glanced again at the dashboard. The photo of Layla was still there, curling slightly at one corner. She had been just 11 when her mother died. Car accident, nothing dramatic, just a sudden swerve, a missed turn, and then nothing. Malik had picked up the pieces the best he could. Every ride, every long hour behind the wheel, every time he swallowed pride to make sure the rent cleared on time, It was all for her. He had once dreamed of working in a lab, something tied to the tech skills he developed in the military. But without a degree, he never made it past the first interviews. You have real-world experience, one HR manager had said, but not the right credentials. That phrase stuck with him. The right credentials. He supposed that's what life came down to for people like him, being good enough. But never credentialed enough. Naomi checked her watch. The motion was small, but Malik caught it in the mirror. He wondered what she did. What kind of job required such silence? Such steel? There was something about her posture, upright but not rigid, controlled but not cold, that suggested she was used to walking through places where most people whispered. The light turned green. Malik pressed the gas, the car easing forward. Still no words from the backseat. He adjusted the mirror one last time and saw her eyes, not tired, not distracted, but watchful. Maybe she had been listening. Maybe she had been studying the way he drove, the way he didn't speak unless spoken to, the way he fit into the world like someone who knew how easily it could push back. He didn't know who she was, but in the days that followed, he would remember that look, that quiet pause, that unspoken moment between two strangers in a car neither of them knew would become a witness to more than just a ride. And somehow, even then, it had already begun. The traffic thinned as Malik turned onto Liberty Avenue, the final stretch toward the federal buildings. The morning sun had warmed the sidewalk, and commuters were beginning to trickle into the city, some clutching coffee cups, others staring down at their phones. Malik felt the quiet comfort of routine settle back in. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Naomi remained composed, her phone resting lightly in her lap, eyes forward, posture unchanged. Then came the sound, sharp and sudden. A police siren wailed behind them, shrill and unmistakable. Malik's stomach dropped before his mind caught up. He glanced into the mirror again, this time catching the flashing blue and red lights closing in fast. He sighed through his nose. Not startled, just tired. He signaled, pulled over smoothly to the curb, and put the car in park. The hum of the engine lingered as he placed both hands calmly on the steering wheel. His eyes flicked again to Naomi in the mirror. She had looked up now, head slightly tilted, still silent. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her phone. A white patrol car pulled in behind them. The door opened, and a tall officer stepped out, mid-40s. Lean, with a straight jaw and square shoulders. His sunglasses masked his eyes, but his mouth was set in a line that told Malik everything he needed to know. The officer approached the driver's side window without greeting. License and registration, he said flatly. Malik nodded once, reached into the center console, and retrieved both documents. Yes, sir, he said, handing them over with practiced calm. The officer barely glanced at them before muttering, "This vehicle looks out of place. You the owner?" Malik paused just a beat. Not from fear, from exhaustion. "Yes, officer. Registered in my name." The man looked at him longer this time. The silence lingered, not searching, not uncertain, just slow enough to imply doubt. A familiar routine wrapped in a new morning. Malik didn't flinch. From the back seat, Naomi remained still. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't moved. The officer, Brent Haley, as his badge read, took a half step back and gestured for Malik to exit the vehicle. "Step out of the car. Please. I'm doing a routine check." Malik met his gaze, then slowly opened the door and stepped out. His hands were visible, movements calm. "Sir, can I ask what the stop is for?" "You'll get your answer in a moment," Brent said curtly. His hand dropped, not fully, but close enough to rest against the holster at his side. The gesture wasn't sudden, but it didn't need to be. A jogger across the street slowed, noticing the scene. Then a pedestrian, young, mid-20s, stopped, pulled out a phone, and began filming. Brent circled around the car, peering into the back seat, his eyes brushing past Naomi, then narrowing as if he recognized something he couldn't quite place. He said nothing to her. Malik stood quietly on the sidewalk, fingers laced, body still. It wasn't the first time he'd been in a moment like this, but it was the first time in a while that the silence cut quite this deep. He could feel Naomi watching, but still, she said nothing. Brent leaned slightly toward the open driver's door, his eyes scanning the car's interior. "You got anything I should know about?" he asked. "No, sir." The officer didn't respond. Instead, his hand reached toward the small pouch on his belt, fingers brushing the cool metal of a pair of handcuffs. That's when Naomi moved. She didn't speak, not yet, but her thumb pressed lightly on the side button of her phone. Screen flashing once before fading. Recording. Brent didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care. His body angled toward Malik again, hand now fully resting on the cuffs. "Look, I've got a report about suspicious vehicles in this area. And frankly, something about this doesn't sit right." Malik's voice was quiet, controlled. "I'm a driver. That's my passenger. I haven't broken any law. Step back. I'll ask the questions." Malik obeyed, inching back onto the sidewalk. But his eyes didn't drop. They stayed level, firm, not confrontational, just unwilling to shrink. Brent's expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker, a wrinkle near his temple. He was used to compliance. Not this quiet resistance, not this refusal to play the role handed to him. Naomi watched everything, watched the cuffs, the stare down, the spectators gathering across the street. She still hadn't spoken, but inside her, something shifted. She thought of all the briefings, all the reports, all the footage she'd seen over the years. She thought of every file stamped internal only. She knew this scene. She had seen it dissected in meetings, spun in media responses, locked away behind closed doors. But she had never sat inside it. Until now. And what shook her wasn't the aggression. It was the silence, Malik's silence, and the way he carried it, not as fear, but as something practiced, something inherited. She looked down at her phone. The screen was still black, but the recording light blinked softly at the corner. Waiting for the moment she would decide whether silence served justice or protected something else entirely. The cuffs made a faint metallic click as Officer Brent Haley flicked them open with one hand. His other hovered near Malik's arm, ready to grab. "What do you have in the trunk?" he barked, not waiting for a response. Malik didn't flinch. He kept his voice even, steady as the sidewalk beneath him. "Just a water bottle and an emergency kit. Standard stuff." Brent didn't stop. His eyes narrowed, scanning Malik's face as if searching for some unspoken admission of guilt. He stepped closer, lifting the cuffs higher. "I have reason to suspect this vehicle may contain contraband. Hands behind your back." More people were watching now. A jogger had stopped at the corner. A young mother pushing a stroller paused, eyes darting between the officer and the man standing still with his palms exposed. A city bus slowed to a crawl across the street, passengers turning their heads toward the unfolding scene. One person, already recording, panned their phone from Malik to Brent and back again. And then, behind them, a car door opened. Naomi stepped out of the backseat. She didn't move quickly. She didn't raise her voice. But there was something in the way she closed the car door, quietly, deliberately, that turned every nearby gaze toward her. Brent didn't notice her at first. His focus was locked on Malik's hands. But then her voice came, firm and even, cutting clean through the air. "Officer Haley." Brent paused. His shoulders stiffened as he turned halfway, annoyance flashing across his face. Naomi was already holding her badge. Her hand was steady, the leather case unfolded, the silver emblem glinting in the sun. "Naomi Ellison, Deputy Director, FBI. I'm currently en route to a federal briefing. And you've just unlawfully interfered with the vehicle I'm riding in." The silence that followed was deafening. The mother with the stroller took a step back. The jogger dropped his water bottle. The person filming let out a breath and said, almost involuntarily, "FBI?" Brent's face lost its color. His jaw twitched. He blinked once, slowly, as if recalibrating what reality he had just stepped into. The cuffs in his hand lowered half an inch. I wasn't aware," he started. But his voice had lost its previous authority. Naomi didn't budge. "You should have asked before escalating. Or maybe just listened when he complied. Either way, you're out of line." A second patrol car pulled up, lights still flashing. From it stepped a younger officer, stockier, still adjusting his utility belt as he hurried over. The moment his eyes met Naomi's, he froze. "Ma'am," he said quickly, "I didn't realize you were involved." Naomi turned slightly toward him but didn't shift her tone. Inform your command. This officer needs to step back immediately. I want his direct supervisor at this location within 10 minutes. The younger officer nodded and spoke into his radio. Voice low and tense. Brent Haley still hadn't moved. His grip on the cuffs loosened, then dropped completely. The sound of them hitting the concrete was oddly small. Malik watched the whole thing, heart beating in his ears. He felt like a man in someone else's dream. The kind where you say nothing and everything changes around you. He didn't know who Naomi really was, not until this moment, but something in him had suspected she wasn't just another commuter. Still, seeing her stand there, calm and commanding, with the entire street hanging on her words, it was like watching someone flip a switch on the world. Brent stepped back, lips pressed in a thin, pale line. He didn't look at Malik anymore. Naomi turned to Malik. For the first time since she'd entered his car, she really looked at him, not as her driver, not as a stranger, but as a man. You all right? She asked. Her voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't cold either. It was grounded, like she wasn't just asking for courtesy. Malik nodded, then said the truth. I'm used to it. The answer was plain. It wasn't meant to accuse. It wasn't meant to impress. But Naomi felt something tighten in her chest the moment he said it. Used to it, as if that was something anyone should ever have to be. She held his gaze a beat longer. Then she looked away, not because she had lost focus, but because something else had shifted. Something inside her. This wasn't the last time she would speak up. That much, she knew. Not anymore. They sat in silence for nearly a block before Naomi spoke again. Her voice had changed. It was no longer flat, nor distant. There was weight in it now, as if every word had been weighed before it left her lips. Take the next left, she said softly. Malik obeyed without question. His grip on the wheel had relaxed. But something deeper in him hadn't yet. The aftershock of the scene they had just left still lingered. He wasn't trembling. He wasn't angry. He just felt full. Full of something unnamed. Naomi guided him toward a quiet lot tucked behind the state archives. It was mostly empty. Just a few government-plated cars and an old pickup parked under a patchy maple. Malik shifted into park and turned off the engine, but left his hands resting on the wheel. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek card case. She didn't present it with a flourish. She simply held it between two fingers and set it on the center console. Deputy Director, FBI, Newford Regional Office. The card read in embossed silver. Malik looked at it, then at her. I'd like to speak with you more, she said. Monday morning. If you're willing. You won't need to schedule anything. Just show up. He blinked, unsure how to respond. I'm not sure I understand. I'm just a driver. Naomi turned her head and looked at him fully this time. Her gaze wasn't hard, it was exacting. Exactly, she said. The card stayed between them as she exited the car. 2 days later, Malik stood in the security line of a towering glass building downtown. He'd pressed his shirt twice that morning, changed his shoes 3 times. He wasn't sure why he was nervous, maybe because the last time he walked into a federal building. He was renewing Layla's passport. This felt different, bigger, and not about Layla this time. He passed through the metal detector, showed the card to a stone-faced guard, and was waved through. An assistant in a gray blazer met him in the atrium and guided him into an elevator without asking too many questions. 10th floor, 12th floor, silence. The conference room where Naomi waited wasn't grand. It had no sweeping views or glass walls. It had a low ceiling, quiet lighting, and a long table that looked like it hadn't been changed in 20 years. On the table, a manila folder sat neatly closed. Naomi stood when he entered. Thank you for coming. Malik nodded, unsure where to put his hands. Have a seat, she said, motioning gently. He sat. The chair creaked. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I won't ask how you felt Saturday, Naomi began, and I don't want to ask how often it's happened before. What I want to ask is simpler. She leaned forward. If you saw that happening to someone else, someone who didn't have a passenger like me, would you speak up? Or would you stay quiet? Malik looked at her, then down at the table. His thoughts felt slow, like his mind had too many layers to peel back in time. He wasn't sure if he was embarrassed, or overwhelmed, or both. I don't know what I could do, he said finally. Naomi didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened the folder, pulled out a tablet, and tapped the screen. A video played, a different driver. Different city. A man in his 40s. Darker skin, standing beside his car while an officer rifled through his trunk. The voice on the video was too far to hear clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. The driver looked calm, too calm, the kind of calm that came from knowing anything else might cost more than it was worth. The video ended, cutting to black. That clip went viral for 3 days. Naomi said, then it disappeared, just like the driver's complaint. Just like the follow-up report. Nothing happened. It faded. She looked at Malik again. I don't want what happened Saturday to be a blip. I want it to be a signal. A start. Malik shifted in his seat. He wasn't used to being at the center of anything, much less the center of a conversation that might change something. He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't plan to be in any of this, he said. Neither did I, Naomi replied. They sat there a moment longer, letting the quiet fill in the pieces neither of them had the words for. As he stood to leave, she handed him a new card, this one with a printed program title, Public Rights Initiative, Transport Sector. If there were a training program, she said, to teach drivers like you what to do, what to document, how to protect yourselves and others, would you join it? Malik didn't answer right away. But as he walked down the long hallway toward the elevator, Naomi could tell by the way he slipped the card into his wallet. Not his pocket. That he wasn't walking away from this. Not anymore. The name of the program was simple, Transit and Justice. To anyone outside the room, it sounded like another initiative with a modest budget and a few printable posters. But for Naomi Ellison, it was more than policy. It was a small, stubborn line drawn in a space where people like Malik Thompson were often erased. She had spent the last 2 weeks meeting with interagency coordinators, writing draft proposals, listening to transportation leaders talk about training videos and workplace liability. But none of it felt real until Malik agreed to speak. He didn't agree easily. The first time she asked, he politely declined, said he didn't want to be the face of anything, said he was just trying to keep things quiet for his daughter. The second time, he smiled a little less. I'm not sure I'm built for cameras, he said. I'm not polished like you folks. But Naomi had left him with space. And then, 2 days later, he called. My daughter said something, he told her over the phone. She said if I keep quiet, then the next guy who looks like me might not be so lucky. So, if you still want me to do it, I'll try. The recording took place in a room barely wider than the parking spaces outside it. A single soft light overhead. 2 chairs. 1 camera. Malik sat with his palms on his knees, shoulders squared but not stiff. Naomi sat off screen, listening. He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He just told the truth. He described the stop, the officer, the cold weight of the handcuffs being readied, the heat behind his eyes that he had taught himself not to show. Then he talked about Naomi, not by title, just as the woman in the back seat. He said she changed everything. Not because she had authority, but because she had chosen to use it. When the video was over, Malik didn't say much. He stepped outside, looked up at the gray clouds gathering over the federal building, and went home. He didn't ask when it would be shown or who would see it. He had done his part. The next morning, Officer Brent Haley submitted a request for administrative leave. The day after that, a memo was leaked from the Department of Internal Oversight. A quiet inquiry was opening into a pattern of discretionary stops in the Newford area, particularly involving black male drivers. The names were redacted, but Naomi recognized the cases. One by one, the stories started to align like lights on a runway. Malik's wasn't the first, but his had turned on the switch. Naomi got pulled into a hallway meeting that same week. A higher-up from DC came down for a casual check-in. He wore a navy tie and a tired smile. You're stirring the pot, he said lightly. You're making waves where we'd hoped for still water. Just be careful. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him and said, if the water's still while people are drowning, maybe it needs to move. He said nothing. The video was played the following week at a transportation policy summit. Most of the audience were local leaders, union heads, and representatives from rideshare platforms. But also there were drivers. Dozens of them, People in work boots and hoodies. People who rarely got the microphone. Naomi had invited Malik to speak live. He nearly said no again. But Layla stood at the door that morning, backpack slung on one shoulder, and said simply, "Just say it like you're talking to me." So he did. He stood at the podium in a wrinkled gray jacket and said the words without notes. His voice wasn't loud, but every pause was measured, and every word had weight. "I didn't come here to share a complaint," he said. "I came to share a pattern. A moment where I was seen, not as a threat, but as a person. And I want other drivers to know that moment is possible. But it won't happen if we all stay quiet." The room was still. And then, after the applause, as Malik stepped down from the stage, a young man, no older than Layla, rushed over and embraced him without warning. "You just said what I've been trying to say in my head for 2 years." The young man said, "You said it out loud." Malik smiled gently, one hand still clutching his jacket hem. "You've already got the words," he said. "You just needed the moment. Start today." He didn't realize Naomi was standing a few steps back, watching. She saw the exchange. She saw the weight shift. And she knew then, it was no longer about one traffic stop. It was about everything that silence had covered for far too long. It was a quiet Tuesday when the call came in. The kind of morning where sunlight cut cleanly through the kitchen window, catching the corner of Malik's coffee mug. He had just dropped Layla off for her morning class. And the house, for once, was still. He didn't expect the voice on the other end to be from Naomi's office. And he definitely didn't expect the request that followed. Not a public speech, not another panel. This was something else entirely. A closed-door roundtable, her assistant explained. Government and corporate. "Naomi believes your presence matters." Malik listened. He didn't answer right away. The house ticked around him. Finally, he asked, "Am I supposed to say something?" "Yes," the voice said, "but only if you're ready." 1 week later, Malik walked through the side entrance of the Newford Municipal Government Center. There were no cameras, no reporters, just a long hallway with outdated carpeting and doors too heavy for their hinges. He wore the same gray jacket from the summit, freshly pressed. In his breast pocket, Naomi's card sat like an anchor. She met him outside the meeting room, clipboard in hand, jacket off. Her sleeves were rolled, and her expression unreadable. "There's no stage," she said softly. "No spotlight, just a table, and people who need to hear you." Malik nodded. "You sure you don't want to speak instead?" "I've already spoken," she replied. "They've heard me. I don't think they've ever heard someone like you." Inside, the room was colder than he expected. Not the air, just the energy. Around the U-shaped table sat familiar institutions with unfamiliar faces. Department of Justice, Department of Transportation, senior policy staff from Uber and Lyft, and a few badges from Newford PD. No introductions were made out loud. Only Naomi offered him a chair. Across the room, near the end of the line, sat Brent Haley. His posture was straighter than before. No sunglasses this time, just a man in uniform. Hands folded, mouth still. He didn't make eye contact when Malik entered. Malik glanced his way once, then looked forward and never looked back. Naomi tapped the table gently. "We'll begin with Mr. Malik Thompson." Malik stood, not because he needed to, but because sitting didn't feel right. He didn't prepare a speech. He wasn't there to perform. So he did what he always did best. He told the truth. "I was pulled over for doing my job," he began. "I wasn't speeding. I wasn't weaving through traffic. I was driving a woman to her meeting." The room didn't move. Not a cough. Not a shuffle. "I followed every instruction. I spoke respectfully. I complied. And still, I was treated like someone dangerous. Like someone wrong. And the only thing that saved me was who happened to be sitting behind me." He looked across the table, pausing just long enough for the silence to settle. If she hadn't been there, I don't know how that would have ended. And that's not fear talking. That's experience. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. But his voice landed like stone. "I'm not here to ask for anyone's sympathy. I'm here to ask, if I didn't have someone in the backseat that day, would I still be standing in this room?" A long pause. Then another. It was a woman from Uber who broke the stillness. Middle-aged, hair pulled tight, suit crisp. "We've been reviewing protocols for driver safety," she said. We'll implement a direct line for incident escalation. No more generic responses. A man from the Department of Transportation added, "We're exploring joint training modules with police departments, bias awareness. Driver rights. It's overdue." Malik didn't respond. He simply sat. Naomi stayed silent. She didn't need to say a word. She knew that what Malik had done with plain words had shifted something the policies never could. He had made power sit still. He had made it listen. Then came the twist no one expected. At the far end of the table, a man stood, shorter than Brent, dressed in plain clothes. The second officer from that morning. The one who had arrived late. The one who said nothing while Malik stood on the sidewalk. He cleared his throat. "I was there that day," he said, "and I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have." All eyes turned to him. "I want to apologize, not just to Mr. Thompson, but to everyone else who didn't have a witness, or a camera, or a voice in the room." He looked at Malik, then at Naomi. "I'm willing to testify to what happened. If this becomes a case, if this becomes more, I won't be silent again." Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She only turned to Malik and gave him the smallest nod. A nod that said, without words, "You've stepped into something bigger than yourself. And you didn't blink." The neighborhood was still when Malik stepped outside. It was early Saturday morning. The kind of quiet that made you pause for a second before locking the door. No cars. No garbage trucks. Just birdsong and that light chill that clings to your sleeves before the sun warms everything up. He wasn't heading out to drive anymore. That part of his life had shifted. These days, he split his time between community sessions with the Department of Transportation and part-time work helping train new city drivers. But this morning wasn't about either. It was Layla's orientation day. Her first real step into college life. She waited for him at the curb, bouncing slightly on her heels. She wore the blue backpack they'd picked out together and held the second-hand laptop Malik had stretched himself thin to afford. Still worked fine, and she loved it like it was brand new. "Big day," he said, smiling as he approached. Layla grinned. "Big shoes to fill." He didn't answer, just opened the car door for her like he had for so many others. Back when his life was still about 5-star ratings and watching the mirror. They arrived on campus just as students were beginning to trickle in. Some already looked lost, maps in hand. Others acted like they'd lived there for years. Layla jumped out, waving back at him, already chatting with another girl about dorm sizes. He stayed a moment longer, letting the morning settle around him. Just as he turned to leave, he heard it. "Hey, excuse me, are you Malik Thompson?" He turned. A young man, probably 19, was jogging toward him, hand raised awkwardly in a half-wave. He wore a university lanyard and carried a tattered notebook under one arm. "Yes," Malik said, cautiously. The young man looked nervous but determined. "I just wanted to say, I saw your video, the one at the summit. I was going through something similar, got pulled over while working late. I didn't say anything at the time, but after hearing you, it helped. A lot. Just wanted you to know." Malik took a breath. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. But instead of brushing it off, he nodded and held the young man's gaze. "Then pass it on," he said. "Someone else might be waiting for the moment you already had." The boy smiled, said thank you, and disappeared into the crowd. Later that day, Naomi stood outside the FBI field office, blinking up at the sun. Her assistant approached, holding a folder. "We got the quarterly report. Complaints of excessive stops are down 18% in Newford. That's significant." Naomi took the report, didn't open it. She just looked toward the skyline. Quiet for a long beat. "That's good," she said finally. Inside a vocational classroom across town, a group of new rideshare drivers was wrapping up a session on protocol and passenger safety. Someone pointed to a quote taped to the whiteboard at the front of the room. It read, "Not everyone can change the whole system. But if you choose not to stay silent, that system will have to change around you." The name below was simple. Malik Thompson. Back at home, Malik sat at his kitchen table, the evening light pooling across the wood grain like spilled tea. Layla was in her room, humming some song too new for him to know. He reached for his old pen, the one he used to keep in the car, next to the gear shift, and laid it down next to a blank leather notebook. It had been a gift. He hadn't touched it yet. Layla walked by, noticed. What are you gonna write in that? She asked. He smiled at her, then looked down at the page. Maybe, he said softly, the things nobody teaches you on the road. But you've got to learn anyway, if you want to live right. She didn't say anything, but before she walked off, she tapped the notebook gently and said, start with that. He thought maybe he would. He didn't raise his voice, but the room listened anyway. Sometimes, it's not power that shifts the world, it's presence. A presence that says, I see you, and this time, I won't look away. Not all change begins with a protest. Sometimes, it begins with a man behind the wheel, choosing not to disappear. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, or even just a pause, subscribe to Undercover Truths for more stories that echo long after they end. Thank you for watching.